The invitation didn't come through the manager. And it didn't come through the mail. It was found in a book that Keanu had bought in a small second-hand shop on the outskirts of Los Angeles, an old edition of Hermann Hesse's Damien. Inside, between the pages, was an envelope. No signature. Just a simple letter *, Mr. Reeves, that we know you don't hold meetings with students. But this time we're asking you not for PR, not for selfies. Just come, that there's a class. Older kids. They need silence that speaks. They need someone to tell them not to shout in order to be heard. That we won't tell anyone if you come. But they'll remember if you don't. Signature, just one of the teachers. St. Joseph High School, Riverside County. Keanu held the letter in his hands for a long time. He didn't say anything to anyone. He just wrote to himself on a piece of paper, "You were the one who needed such a letter." And he left that St. Joseph's School greeted him quietly. A concrete building, shabby stairs, children in dark uniforms. No stage. He was given an auditorium, an ordinary one, with long rows of desks. He was asked to sit in the front, not on the stage, not behind the lectern. Just in the middle of them, the students were already sitting together, some turning a pen in their fingers, some secretly looking at their phones. When he entered, at first no one in the room understood who he was. Until someone whispered, "It's him." Keanu nodded briefly, smiled. He sat down. He waited for them to calm down. "Hello," he said. "My name is Keanu." "We know," a voice from the back row said. A light laugh. "I'm not here as an actor. I'm here simply as a person who once sat in a classroom like this. And thought he would never leave these walls intact." That he spoke slowly. About losses. About insecurity. About how he was kicked out of class because "dreamer" wasn't a compliment. How he worked as a janitor. How he read lines to himself in the mirror when even the theater wouldn't take him, and at that moment, when everything in the auditorium became almost warm, she stood up. Ms. Marta. A social studies teacher. In a strict gray suit, with a long ring on her finger, with a look that never blinked when she spoke. "Excuse me," she said loudly, "but perhaps before romanticizing life's failures, it's worth reminding yourself that school is not a stage. And we're not here for performances." The class froze. Someone shifted their gaze to Keanu. Someone lowered his eyes. "Mr. Reeves," she continued from below, not coming closer, "I don't deny that your story is emotional. But is it an example for students? Without education. Without a base. From the screen, yes. But from life?" Keanu was silent. There was no smile. "You say that you were not sure of yourself. But you also say that you became someone. Don't you see that this gives rise to false hope? That everyone who doesn't study thinks that they will become the next someone." Someone behind him coughed. There was something sharp in the air, like the smell of smoke before a flame. "Excuse me," she added, "I just have to remind you, this is a school. This is study. Not a therapy group." And then Keanu stood up for the first time, not for an answer. For silence, and that silence scared her more than any words. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't shift his weight or look away. He just stood there, in the center of the room, grounded like someone who knew that staying still, truly still, was sometimes louder than anything else. The students watched him. One by one, Their bodies leaned forward, as if his calm pulled them toward him. "I'm not here to replace your teachers," Keanu said gently. "I'm not a substitute for knowledge. I'm someone who came because, maybe you needed to hear from a person who doesn't have it all figured out." Ms. Martha scoffed loudly. "Spare us the theater, Mr. Reeves. This isn't a movie. These are children." He looked at her, but didn't interrupt. "You walk in here and drop your little pearls of pain, your suffering, your noble struggle. What is that supposed to do? Inspire them? You think you're some sort of moral compass just because you've been in a few sad interviews?" Some students shifted uncomfortably. The boy in the hoodie lowered his eyes. A girl by the window clutched the sleeve of her sweater. Keanu spoke quietly, "I don't think I'm a compass. I think I'm just a person who remembers what it's like to feel directionless." "You think we need that?" she snapped. "You think they need you for that?" Her voice rose. "They need structure. Discipline. Respect for education. Not a wandering man with trauma and a jawline." The last word echoed too long in the room. A few students flinched. Keanu didn't move. "You know what's dangerous," he said, finally. "It's not that I'm here. It's that you think being vulnerable in front of them is weakness." She stared at him. Unblinking. Breathing sharp. "They have enough softness," she barked. "They need strength. They need to stop whining and perform. Do well. Obey." Keanu looked at the students. "How many of you," he said softly, "have felt like your sadness wasn't allowed?" A few hands lifted. "How many of you have ever wanted to leave a classroom because no one saw what you were really carrying?" More hands. Slowly. Hesitantly. Ms. Martha's face was burning now. "Enough of this emotional manipulation," she shouted. "This is my classroom. Mine. And I will not let some actor come in and turn it into a therapy circle." The door opened. The principal stood there. Suit. Quiet eyes. He looked at her. Then at Keanu. Then at the students. "Ms. Martha. Can we speak for a moment?" But she didn't stop. She pointed at Keanu with a trembling hand. "You're poisoning them. You're making them weak. You're giving them excuses to fail. You're romanticizing your damage, and that's not noble, it's dangerous." The principal stepped inside now. Calm, but firm. "Ms. Martha. That's enough." "No, it's not," she said, almost panting. "You invited him. You undermined my work. You've destroyed my authority." She turned back to Keanu. "And you? You don't belong in this room. You don't belong anywhere near these kids." Keanu looked at her. Not with anger. With deep, quiet pity. "I didn't come here to belong," he said. "I came here so they could see someone stand in the middle of rage and not become it." The room went still. The principal placed a hand on her arm. "Now, Martha." And something in her finally broke. She looked around the room at the faces. The silence. The space she couldn't fill, and she walked out, but not like a teacher leaving her post. Like someone who realized too late that the room had already made its choice. The door closed behind her. Ms. Martha's footsteps faded down the hallway like someone walking out of a building that would never let them back in. The class sat in full, weighty stillness. No one reached for their phones. No one whispered. No one even looked around to see who would break the moment first. Keanu remained standing. That he didn't rush to comfort the room. He didn't say, It's okay. He didn't tell them to move on. He let them sit in the echo of what had just happened, not to scare them, but to respect them. Finally, after nearly a minute, a voice came from the fourth row, soft. Almost a whisper. Why didn't you yell back? Keanu turned slowly to the boy. He had freckles, dark hair, a gray sweatshirt with the sleeves pulled over his hands. His voice cracked just slightly at the end. I mean, he added, eyes dropping to his desk, you could've. Keanu walked a few steps toward him, then stopped, and smiled gently, not with amusement, but with understanding. I've spent most of my life, Keanu said, trying to learn that not every fight needs to be loud. He looked around the room. You saw what just happened. If I had shouted back, would anything have changed? Would she have listened more? No one answered. She wasn't trying to hear. She was trying to win. That's not the same thing. A girl with braids in the back row slowly raised her hand. Keanu nodded to her. She looked nervous. My dad, he yells. A lot. When he's losing control. But when my mom's really hurt, she doesn't yell. She just stops talking. And that's always worse. Keanu held her gaze, quietly. Yeah, he said. I know that kind of silence too. Then another voice. Did you ever feel like leaving everything? A pause. Keanu took a breath. Yes. They waited. I've felt like disappearing more times than I can count. And not just physically, I mean, as a person. Disappearing into noise, into work, into pain. Just fading. Why didn't you? Someone asked. That he sat down now, finally. Cross-legged on the stage floor like a student. I don't know. Some days I think I did disappear. But then someone would remind me I was still here. Even if it was small. He looked at them. Someone letting me talk. Someone not turning away. A letter in a book. A quiet moment in a place like this. You said pain makes people listen, the freckled boy said again. But what if you're in pain and no one does? Keanu didn't answer at first, then he said, very gently, then you listen to yourself. He looked at them all. Not quickly. One face at a time. Do you know how many adults in your life are terrified of silence? He said. They fill it with rules, and grades, and lectures. But sometimes, silence is the only place the truth feels safe. The girl with braids whispered, that's why she hated you. Keanu didn't deny it. She hated what I didn't say, he said. Because she knew it was louder than anything she could shout. Then a hand lifted from the quietest student in the class. A small boy in the corner, glasses too big, voice barely there. Can I ask you something real? Keanu nodded. Did you forgive her? A pause. Keanu looked down, then back up. I think so, he said. Not because she earned it. But because I didn't want to carry her pain with me. He stood again, and neither should you. He walked toward the door, but just before he reached it, he turned back. Hey, he said, scanning the room one more time. Next time someone tells you that your pain is weakness, he waited a beat, ask them how much strength it takes to still show up. Then he left, and for a long time, no one spoke, but when they did, they didn't talk about her. They talked about him, not the actor, not the star, but the man who didn't flinch when someone tried to silence him and taught them what it looks like to stand inside the fire and not burn. That it happened a week after that conversation. After the silence that replaced the scream. After Marta left school. After the class began to breathe differently, everything seemed to return to normal. The schedule. Lessons. The bells. But the air the students breathed was no longer the same, and then, on Friday, at 2:06 p.m., he appeared again. No one invited him. No one knew about it. He simply walked into the library. An old room with wooden shelves, dust that they didn't have time to wipe off, and lamps that burned dimly, as if they were saying, "We're not here for beauty." At this time, there were usually 3 or 4 students sitting here, some doing homework, some pretending to read. Keanu entered without looking at anyone. He walked between the rows, chose one of the books, an old edition of Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, sat down at the farthest table by the window, and began to read. He didn't look back, he didn't speak, he didn't wait. A few minutes later, the guy in the hoodie who had seen him on stage that day entered the library and froze. His gaze lingered, but Keanu didn't look up. The guy came over. He sat down at the next table. He also pulled out a book. He didn't open it. He just was. 10 minutes later, another girl came. Then another. By the end of the lesson, there were already more than 15 students sitting in the library. No one spoke. Someone opened a book. Someone just sat and looked out the window. Some took out their headphones but didn't turn on the music. Everyone looked at him. Or didn't look. But they felt, this is not a visit. This is not a lesson. This is a presence. When the bell rang, he quietly closed the book, stood up, put it back in its place, and left without saying a word. But the next day, a table appeared in the library, on which someone had left a card, a table where you can be. Without the obligation to speak. Without the fear of being silent. There was no signature, but everyone knew who started it. His name was Elias. He was the kind of student who never got in trouble, never made noise, never made anyone worry, and never got asked how he was doing. When Keanu Reeves sat silently in the library that day, Elias didn't speak. But something shifted inside him. It wasn't what Keanu said. It was what he didn't say. The next day, Elias found him. Keanu was sitting in a small cafe 2 blocks from the school, reading. Alone. At peace. Elias stood outside for a long time, then finally walked in. The bell over the door rang softly. Keanu looked up and smiled, not surprised. "You can sit," he said. Elias sat. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, "I don't want to be loud," he admitted. "But it feels like the world won't let me be quiet." Keanu nodded. "It doesn't have to be loud to be real." Elias looked away. "Sometimes I think if I don't speak up, I'll disappear." Keanu's voice was soft. "Some of us weren't made to shout. We were made to listen. To see. That matters." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn notebook. He placed it on the table. "I used to write what I couldn't say," he said. "You might want to try." Elias held the notebook carefully. Blank pages. Quiet space. "I'm not a writer." "You don't have to be. Just someone who knows how to feel." They sat for a moment longer. No pressure. No explanations, and before Keanu stood to leave, he said, "Being quiet doesn't make you invisible. Sometimes, it just means you're the only one actually hearing." That night, Elias opened the notebook and wrote, "I didn't speak, but he still understood me." Keanu didn't come back again, not officially. Not to speak. Not to visit, but for the students in that classroom, especially for Elias, it wasn't about seeing him again, that it was about what he left behind. A week passed. Then and something in the school changed, not loudly, not suddenly, but like light moving across a room you didn't realize was dark. It began with Elias, that he still didn't raise his hand, that he still sat in the third seat from the left, near the wall, but now, he carried a black notebook, every day, that he didn't show it to anyone. But when others noticed, they stopped teasing. No one joked about him being quiet anymore. Because now, his quiet had weight. Like a silence that had decided it no longer needed to apologize. One afternoon, after lunch, a girl named Ava sat across from him in the library. They didn't speak, but when she opened her sketchbook and quietly began to draw, Elias didn't look away. That he turned a page in his notebook. Wrote something. Closed it. The next day, she brought her own notebook, then another student. Then another. By the end of the month, 6 students sat together every Thursday. Not a club, not an event, not even a group, just space. They wrote, drew, read, or stared out the window. They never called it anything, but the librarian started calling it the table. One morning, the principal passed by and stood watching through the window. He didn't go in. Just placed a sticky note on the door, room for silence. Room for being. After that, students began leaving things behind: a small plant, a poem pinned to the bookshelf, a folded letter labeled, for no one in particular. And still, Elias said little, but when a younger student, someone even quieter than him, hesitated outside the library door one rainy afternoon, Elias stood up, walked over, and held it open. No speech, no smile, just a door opened by someone who used to believe they weren't allowed to open anything at all. That night, at home, Elias added one more page to his notebook. The handwriting was calm now. No hesitation. He left nothing behind except the permission to exist, and somehow, that was everything we needed.